So one of the things we heard from the women we interviewed was, I don't know when they're trying to sell me a product or when they're trying to give me advice that helps me. And then the other thing we heard was, there's so much out there, I don't know where to begin. And I don't know how it applies to me because there's always caveats. There's like this huge legal thing that says, these are it's not investment, it's not advice, basically. And then you can't use it in certain scenarios. So what we do is we use your own numbers. And so we can tell you exactly what scenarios it works for you and when it doesn't work for you.
Hey, Kristine, welcome to the podcast.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you were, before we went started, you were already teaching me stuff about what you're up to. So, Kristine, let's start off first with the introduction on what you do. Can you tell us a little bit more about Untangle Money?
Sure. Untangle Money, we are a fintech startup. We are focused on women. Mm-hmm. We actually feel that Canadians in general are underserved by the financial services industry, especially those Canadians that are relying on bank branch services. But the main pain point is for women. They feel less welcome by the industry, and I'll dive into some reasons why their financial lives are different, which is something that not a lot of people are talking about. And what we're trying to do is answer the questions, which are, can I afford it? And will I be okay in the future? Those are the two most asked questions by women about their money. So that's what we're answering with, and we want to do that through an app that allows you to go through it in a self-paced manner. And by not sitting with someone, perhaps it won't be as embarrassing. And also, we can make it much cheaper that way. So we can make it much more accessible to people.
I love that because, we have such a need for financial knowledge. Being a millennial, we weren't taught any of that stuff growing up.
No.
We just I just finished a podcast recently about this where we talked about how, we're kind of been left in the dark. Like as an adult, you're kind of like thrown to the wind to figure this kind of stuff out yourself. And, we were taught like trigonometry and like, all these physics and laws and all these kind of things, but I don't know how the actual world works that we live in. It's kind of insane, so yeah. Yeah,
it's not linked to intelligence. Like my background in undergrad, I did engineering physics, so I did a lot of trigonometry and these kind of things, but it still didn't prepare me for weeding through thousands of blog posts on how to manage your money. There's so many places out there. Mm-hmm. We don't actually handle your money. We take a snapshot of where you are today. We project that into the future. And then we say, what is it that you need? What does it look like getting there? What's the monthly cost? And then we look at, let's say, our baseline is with a 4.5% rate of return. And so we say in real time, what happens if that's now 6%? And what that teaches people and what that enables people to do is understand what they are willing to vary and what they're comfortable varying in order to get a certain output. Whereas I think traditionally you get one output, which is, either a financial calculator online, here's how much money you need, but it never ties back to your budget to show you if you can afford that. Usually there's not as much you can play around with in real time. So that's something that we're doing, which people seem to really like.
Yeah, before we jump into that, I want to dive a little bit more into like financial knowledge and acquiring it. And I think this is so important because most people are not taught to learn; they're just taught to regurgitate, Yeah. So it's very hard for them to learn new skills or upskill or to obtain new knowledge. And one of the things that I realized when I was in university was that each of these courses are like $500 a pop if you want to be part of a program. There's nothing stopping you from just walking into like a Management 101 course or Econ 101 and just checking it out and just sitting there and getting this for free. So one of the things I would love to do is this is kind of free. Why not just jump in a classroom and see what's going on?
Sort of audit it.
Yeah, but years later, all this stuff is on YouTube. I think Virginia Law School's first year program is all on YouTube.
Really?
Harvard's econ programs all on YouTube, right? Like this is world class people. Like I think Harvard had the former head of Morgan Stanley coming in and running a guest class, and the entire class is now available. And it's like the acquisition of knowledge. You know, it's now become more liberated. You don't have to pay this huge paywall to get into an institution to get it, right?
Yeah.
But the problem, go ahead.
Or sorry, I was gonna say I did the Yale one on happiness, which was really, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. For me, I mean, one of the coolest things was like back in like 2015, 2016, I was switching into sales, but selling and consulting to the financial institutions, right? Yeah. To family offices, to VCs, things like that. I'm like, what is a VC? Like, what do they really like? You know, and you can go onto YouTube and see all these different things, right? Like, I found this great show on Bloomberg where it had like the head of one of the biggest investment firms interviewing other heads of investment firms, and they're talking like they're in an old boys club about like how things really, you know, how they really think about things using terminologies. And you can sit there and just digest this stuff.
Yes.
You know, so in a world where all this knowledge is now free, you know, the real skill set you need to learn is being able to learn or being inspired to learn. Right.
Well, one of the things that we found that was a problem, because frankly, all of the information you need to know about personal finance is out there. It really is. It's knowing how to find trusted advice. So one of the things we heard from the women we interviewed was, I don't know when they're trying to sell me a product or when they're trying to give me advice that helps me. And then the other thing we heard was, there's so much out there, I don't know where to begin. And I don't know how it applies to me because there's always caveats. There's like this huge legal thing that says, you know, these are it's not investment, it's not advice, basically. And then you can't use it in certain scenarios. So what we do is we use your own numbers. And so we can tell you exactly what scenarios it works for you and when it doesn't work for you, which makes it powerful because you're not reading a blog trying to determine if the person who wrote the blog knows what they're talking about. I guess you do have to hope that we know what we're talking about. And then you're not trying to say, well, am I in the right tax bracket? Is this a case? Like, am I the right age? Because very much the advice can be different depending on what stage of life you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this idea of like what most people need is not knowledge, but leadership. And it's like the idea that is like knowledge is now becoming commoditized, right? You can go and acquire it, but how much energy can you put into something? You know, it's all about controlling your energy now. Like, I want to get really good at this thing. You know, I don't necessarily want to focus on this, or I need to learn this. I just need somebody who I trust who can perform this for me.
Yes.
And one of the real cool things with fintech and these softwares and these tools is a verification layer, right? Yeah. They can remove the trustless layer of needing to verify somebody or having a place or having to perform that task of being like, am I going to the right source or going to that? It's like, you know, a machine can help you, decide that for you if you can, as long as the system is there for it.
Well, and then for women specifically, there's a lot of language implications when it comes to finance, and the industry itself is very male dominated. 85% of financial advisors are male, and in them, around the language of money, there's this idea and concept that women are frivolous. Like, we label women's spend as frivolous. No one labels a man who wants to buy a really expensive stereo equipment. No one deems that frivolous. That's discerning. But a woman who gets her nails done, that's frivolous. The problem with that is women are highly represented in service markets where having your nails done is sometimes written into your employment contract. So you have, on one hand, you have these financial advisors looking through your spend and saying, oh, you should cut out these unnecessary costs, and they're judging people. And then on the other hand, we know that women who put a lot of money into the way they look earn higher levels of income. So you have this disconnect between how the information is being told and the reality of the person in that life. And I think that's just one soft side of leadership not occurring in the financial services industry, and not understanding their user base well.
I think you pointed at that really. That's a really great example of talking about a misalignment, right? And a great display of leadership, because that is literally understanding who you're actually leading. It's based up on a deeper level of understanding than a surface level checking the boxes of this is what you should be doing kind of service. And one of the great things about technology is that it brings what was once available only to the upper class or the upper echelons
Yes.
to the masses, right?
100%.
Gives you the power of distribution, lowers the cost of entry, and removes barriers.
Yes.
So, what does that look like? Can you give us an analog of what
Yeah.
a rich person would have had 20 years ago and what
Yeah.
an average person can do now with technology?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the best example is robo-advisors. And quite frankly, we've known for years that 80% of financial advisors do not beat the benchmark. Partially that's due to fees. Like the actual advisors do beat the benchmark, but then after fees, they don't. But we know that 80% of the time they don't beat the benchmark. And they're charging you in order to not beat the benchmark. And this is over a 10-year time horizon. So there are some that can do it at 2 or 3 years in a row, but not over a 10-year time horizon. So you can go to a robo-advisor, you can get like top shelf investment portfolios, and you can get it for 0.5% or 0.35%, I think is the cheapest one in Canada right now. And that enables you to get a diversified portfolio. So ETFs are another revolution, but a diversified portfolio, which used to cost a fortune because you used to have to pay for each stock or bond that you wanted to put into your basket. So now you just buy into a portfolio. They can do automatic rebalancing, so you're not getting overweighted in any sort of stock or any field. And so this was all available to high net worth individuals before. I think they even do tax loss harvesting now at a certain level of service. And this was all available for high net worth clients before. And now it's available to the public for a very reasonable price. And I think another analog is what we're trying to do. There's the free blogs and low cost apps available now. But for a certified financial planner who's fee for service, who doesn't have sort of these back pocket arrangements where they're getting incentivized to sell you certain things. I think sometimes they still are in Canada, which is a problem. But in the States, certainly CFPs are fiduciary, meaning they have responsibility to doing what's best a legal responsibility for doing what's in your best interest. Mm-hmm. That costs between $1,500 and $3,500 to get a plan from them. That is still, in my mind, available to the rich. You need to revisit your plan. Anytime you project that far into the future, it's filled with assumptions. It's directional at best. You need to be able to afford to do this every 1 to 5 years. And at $1,500 to $3,500, the average Canadian probably won't want to spend that.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking to a wealth manager, last year, and talking about the pandemic and what has that done to wealth,
Yes.
And he works at a private firm, a boutique firm that only deals with people who have a net worth of $10 million plus.
Yeah. Yep.
They take over and they plan for it, have yearly reviews, quarterly meetings, monthly updates of where all the wealth lies. And the aspect is that technically, if you're in this class of people, it's very, very hard for you to go broke. Because you have such a support mechanism, right, around you, right? And in fact, he was telling me about this one factor that really blew my mind throughout Canada. It's that when you're in this wealth category, what you do is you go out and buy assets. Some of them are failing assets, but just because you own these assets, there'll be these liquidity events where the government will literally bail you out when there's a recession. Every 10 years, 20 years, there's a recession or a big liquidity event that happens, like a black swan event, and suddenly all of this money gets freed up from that gets created, it gets printed out, and then given out to the asset holders. Yes. And I remember hearing that, and he's like, that's what's happening right now with the pandemic, right? $1 trillion has been printed out and given mostly to people who have assets in a way to spur job creation and to spur all this economic activity.
Yeah. Well, you saw that during the financial crisis, the Fed, which is the American Central Bank, printed an unprecedented amount of money for the first time in history that it's done it to that magnitude.
Yep.
And a lot of that money ended up in the stock market. Mm-hmm. So it's benefiting the people who own stock, and stock wealth is concentrated, I believe, roughly most held by the top 20% of net income holders. So that's another reason why we're focused on
democratizing access.
Putting it and helping people understand. So we looked at something. We looked at an Alberta nurse. Average salary, I think, was $67,000 a year. This could be a bit off, but I think that was the numbers that we used. And we looked at how much she would need for retirement using the Wealth Simple calculator, just because we wanted to use a third party provider. And it was $2 million. She was 25. So she needs to get $2 million in retirement. And it was impossible for her to save her way to retirement. She just simply could not save enough money. I think it was most of her after tax, if not more than all of her after tax dollars, in order to save her way up there. So you have to invest, and you have to employ compound investment. And one of the ways in which, so human brains are not designed to understand compound rates of return or exponential growth, which is what investing does for your money. But a way that you can see it today that is very applicable day to day is in COVID. It has an exponential growth rate, and therefore it accelerates. So it's not linear. It doesn't grow in a straight line. It accelerates and it curves. So it's a bit of a morbid example, but it's very very top of mind for everyone today.
Yeah, I personally love Wealthsimple. Wealthsimple makes so much of my life so much easier because you can just park money there. There was this great quote that really changed the way I think about money. Is that $10,000 if you save it, save $10,000 in cash from the year 2000. Now 20 years later, that $10,000 will be worth $6,000 just because of inflation. So you're actually losing power of value, right? So cash is a tool; it's not an asset. Cash is a tool.
Of value.
It's an exchange of value, right? Instead of trading sheep, we're trading paper, and right. And now it's becoming cashless. We're moving to a cash society where things are more ethereal, right? Mm-hmm. But because of that, things can be programmed. One of the things I love is I recently got an account with Tangerine, formerly. So they allow you to program money, almost like what Bitcoin is promising, right? You can have all these rules you can set for, like, every time I buy something at the bar, take I'd take $1 and put it into this account. You can program money, right? Like that just changes how your relationship with capital, right?
I love the round up ones where they round everything up to $1 and put it in savings. There's some really fantastic tools. There's even savings goals tools where you get rewarded. I think it's Kuber. They spend their marketing dollars on rewards. So instead of marketing, they put all that money into rewarding you for reaching your financial savings target. So let's say you make it to $100, they'll give you $5 on top of that. That's 5% rate of return for saving up money. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. So, going to this, right? Like, going back to the financial model, like what's happening right now and how people can kind of model themselves better, right? Like the Great Depression, we think about the bread lines and like everything going up, but the Great Depression created more millionaires in America than any point in history. Right?
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Isn't that crazy? Like, we think about the people who are like in the streets, but 1/3 of people actually did phenomenally well. 1/3 had no effect at all. They continued their lifestyle, right? And they maintained everything that's going on. 1/3 completely had a drastic drop in lifestyle, and 1/3 did really well. And what really saw was like it just spread the equality index, right? Like between the haves and have-nots,
and growing ever since.
Yeah, and it's been growing ever since, and more liquidity events have happened. Each recession kind of does this, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do we use technology to kind of, bring down that gap? How do we prevent people who are losing from losing too much? And not necessarily capping the people who are gaining, but like just making it so that everyone has access. Because oftentimes it's because of access. You are close to a point of knowledge, or have a relative or someone who can actually advise you or tell you what to do or do this. Buy that property at this age. Spend your money here. Do this to save, right? So how do we make society more equal using technology?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have developed Untangle Money's product the way we have. It's because we really want people to understand money and how it works without having any bias. So we don't sell you anything. We only sell you the financial plan. And it's cheap. It's $35. and it enables you to see how you can get from today to where you're going, how you can leverage investing, how investing in higher. One of the other thing about, so words are really, or can be very gendered. There was this cool Australian study that looked at replacing the word negotiate with the word ask. And when they use the word negotiate, I'm just going to get my notes here. 59% of men negotiated for a higher salary, and only 70% of women within the study negotiated. But when they changed, so this phrase was, many people negotiate for more. Mm-hmm. But when they changed it to many people ask for more, 73% of men negotiate or ask for more, which was a big jump for them, and 69% of women. So you had only a 4-point spread between men and women, just simply by change, and a jump in the men as well, just by changing the word negotiate to ask. And where this applies to something that I see a lot is when you look at risks of portfolio. So women tend to have an average weighted return of 4.5% on their investments. And advisors will put them in higher concentration of bond portfolios, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being in a portfolio that you're comfortable with. But the thing that I want to see is I want women to understand, yes, a 6% return portfolio, they're usually deemed aggressive, which is not a word that we like, or a lot of women like. A 6% return has a meaningful impact on your investment portfolio and performance and how much money you'll have at the end of the day. And I want women to have the ability to stop and weigh the risk of losing some of their money to volatility in the stock market in a diversified basket, which shouldn't underperform for the long term. You're not going to lose all your money forever unless the whole world goes to hell in a handbasket. And it didn't happen with COVID, and it didn't happen with the financial crisis. So it probably won't happen. You can't say that with certainty, but some degree of certainty. But then on the other hand, weighing the risk of not having enough money in retirement and underfunding your retirement. We know that women as a gender they go in below the poverty line. They enter poverty in retirement of the most of anybody else. So they are overrepresented of the poor in retirement. And it's because they outlived their money, because they were in these safe portfolios that didn't generate enough assets. And then if it's okay, I just wanted to drill. Is it okay if I drill into how women and men are different financially?
Yo, absolutely, please.
Okay. So I printed these out because I didn't see a share screen. But okay. So here you can see men and women have, this is like how women's money goes over time, right? So we start out the same. It doesn't show it. But here we have maternity leave, and here we have elder care responsibilities. And so what happens, and we work part-time and our income peaks earlier. And this one's actually scarier. So, it's hard to see.
Yeah, I mean, there is a share screen if you have the file.
Oh, is there? I do have the file.
Yeah. So at the bottom, it should be a screen share button next to. Do you see the camera, the mic? Is your screen?
I can share the screen. This is amazing. Can I? Maybe I can't.
Yeah, let me check. You should 100% have that.
I have the camera. It's just asking me what I want to share. Security and privacy. All right. I'm going to go back to I'm old, so I'm going to go back to this form. So, it doesn't show up well. Can you see? You can see this graph here. This is Owen, and this graph is Sandra. So this is when Sandra turns 40. So I'm older than Sandra. And you can see this decline in how much Sandra makes. These are aggregate numbers. And then you can see Owen, his income doesn't peak till he's around 55. But Sandra's peaks in and around 40. And this difference, this is what men can do. This is why men can start saving for retirement when they turn 40. And why women cannot wait, because they don't have the extra 10 to 50. You can't see the scale.
Yeah.
This is about $15,000, maybe $20,000 at the biggest dollars a year that they can put into into investments. And so what happens from that? It all culminates into the wealth gap. So for every dollar a man has in wealth, a woman only has 32 cents. So we talk a lot about the pay gap. And you saw that peak, and that's the glass ceiling effect. Women just aren't going up in their careers the same way as men. But that culminates this whole like not putting enough into investments, not getting paid enough, not being able to fund our retirement later, culminates in this wealth gap. And then we live longer. And we got 32 cents on the dollar to do it with. So that's why we focus on women.
Kristine, that was really amazing because we hear a lot about the wealth gap as a occupational, almost like an occupational hazard. It's like, you're in this occupation and why aren't you making this? But I think the way you kind of put it is like, it's productivity and what you get in return for productivity, and especially the age of that. So why is it that productivity? Like, do women after 40 are they retiring early? Is it?
So I think it's partially the glass ceiling, right? When you look at the upper echelon of companies, the higher up you go, the more male dominated they are. I think women tend to go into industries that pay less to begin with. And then women take career gaps. We're more likely to take maternity leaves, and we're more likely to take elder care responsibilities. So as our parents and our partners' parents age, we're more likely to work part-time. So I think the peak at 40 is a culmination of all those things. It's a little bit too old to be completely dependent on childbearing years, because it's really hard to have kids in your 40s. And most women do have them in like late 20s, early 30s. So it's not quite tied to that, but there's something happening there. So my sense is that it's more to do with the glass ceiling. And you still have 25 years of work after that, right? So peaking at 40 is pretty disheartening.
Yeah, it's crazy because one of the ideas that I think I'm coming to terms with is the idea of how to conceptualize time in relation to like what I want in my life, right?
Yes.
When you're in your 20s, you're such in like this like I feel like you're such in like put in a grinder. Like I have to figure myself out. I have to be in a place because otherwise, if I do it now, I'll never achieve it because I wouldn't have time until you like pass into your 30s, and suddenly it's like, wait, I still have time. There's still time to figure things out, right? And I think one of the craziest facts, like I think your graph there really explains it really well. But your peak production period, income producing period, your peak productivity, return for productivity, is actually in your 40s and 50s.
Only
right?
if you're a man.
Apparently,
it's not true for a woman, right? She peaks at 40.
Yeah.
So her ability to earn income, it shifts your whole mind. And so I have on here, it says the financial services industry is failing women. I think it's true. Yeah. No one's telling them that they need. So I think you'll like this one because it is a play on time, and it's a mental model you can hold. You may not like it because I suspect you're not in your 20s anymore, but there's still help.
30s, early 30s.
Early 30s, wonderful. So $100 invested at 25 can turn into $1,000 by 65. So 10 times at a rate of return of 6.1% after fees. Right? So that's an exponential curve. $100 invested right in the middle at 45, where I am, invested until 65 at the same rate of return, only turns into $300. So less than a third. So for women, if you peak at 40, you're going to be making sure that you're investing that whole time. Whereas men, you can take that gap, that sort of $20,000 a year, turn it into 3 times your money and still be okay. So yes, your peak years are ahead of you. Mine are well behind me.
Oh my God.
So it's if you don't look at the underlying data, you're going to make a product that makes assumptions that don't work. So the financial service industry, and I think we as humans kind of align with this, it's just probably why they've gone with it. We sort of hit 40 and you're like, retirement, right? You've figured out how you want to live. You've figured out your lifestyle. You've probably had children if you want them. Men can do it a little later. Women, outside of adoption are probably settled in that realm. And you hit 40 and you're kind of like, I got to save for retirement. I don't want to work forever. For women, it's a little bit too late. It's never too late. I really want to impart upon women that if you haven't figured out how to work it in before 40, it's only going to get harder.
I mean, that's concerning because, going back to what I was saying about you peak performing years in 40s and 50s, the reason for that, they say is because you've had 20, 30, 40 years of learning. right?
It's the exponential growth on your learning.
Yeah, on your learning, right? You're developed really on your skill sets. You maybe had one, 2, 3 career changes. You've had time to adjust into growing career paths and
You can
adopt knowledge.
see things, right? Things become interrelated as you get older, and you see patterns and familiarizations. You can kind of you've seen enough success stories and horror stories in your own time that aren't your parents' generation telling you. I totally believe that.
Yeah, and it's one of the main reasons why I think 72% of billionaires are 92% of billionaires are first generation wealth, meaning they made money in their lifetime. And I think 72% of them make majority of their money, not even the majority of the money in their 40s and 50s. Yeah. And based off your stats, no wonder they're men, because they're the ones in playing that market, right? They're in that game. So it's like, how do we solve this? Is this a cultural thing? You talk about the glass ceiling, and that's been like a discussion for 30 plus years, right? Remove the glass ceiling in corporate, right? And, so where are we right now? Is it still the glass ceiling effect? Is it a cultural effect?
Yeah. So the pay delta right now, it depends on where you look, but a pretty confident estimate is 87 cents on the dollar. Women are paid 87 for equal pay. Mm-hmm. What that doesn't take into account is the fact that women work in women-oriented industries tend to make less money. So a really applicable one for this is computer work used to be deemed secretarial, and it was awash with women. Ada Lovelace was the first computer programmer. It was deemed a female occupation. And even during the war, when men went off to war and women took their jobs, they were paid, I think 20 cents on the dollar purposefully for the same work. And while you're not legally allowed to do that anymore, when a job is deemed feminine, society seems okay with paying them less. Whereas then when a job becomes masculine, such as the development for computers, suddenly you see an increase in pay. And the problem with this is something we talked about sort of earlier, is the network and flywheel effect. Women tend to know women more so than, or even equally. So if you're more likely to go into jobs where you feel comfortable and you feel welcomed. So you're going to go into female occupations and they're paid less. So that's, I think, the first problem. Then we're paid less for the equal work that we do. Then we take time off. The problem with time off is, and it's not really time off having been a mom, or being a mom. It's certainly not a year off that I thought I was getting. Yeah. It was a lot of work, but we take career gaps. And what happens is I didn't contribute to my company pension at the time I was employed. And I also didn't earn CPP. I wasn't contributing to CPP. So my corporate pensions and my government pension allowance will be lower as well. So there's how do you solve it? The way we look at it is you got to start early. Mm-hmm. You got to invest more than we do right now. Women are much better at saving than investing. And there are some implications. There are some reasons for that. And then we need to invest in higher return portfolios. So we need to put more into stocks. It's the biggest generator of wealth of our time. It's the biggest generator of wealth that we have access to. Real estate's another one, but I think it's less accessible for most people. So it's an ability to own assets that can grow. So we need to put more concentration in there, which is the exact opposite of what the financial industry tells women. Because it tells them they're conservative. It tells them they want to be careful with their money, and then they put them into bonds.
Yeah.
But those are the three things we think women need to do.
Yeah. There was another person who came on a podcast and it was talking about alternative investing for women, right? And one of the things she was pointing out is you talk about the frivolous activities or what's seen to be feminine is weaker or somehow inferior. Yeah. And she's talking about how her and her friends desire to buy $50,000 handmade bags and these high-end items. And everybody always sees it why would you put your money in there? Why aren't you buying stock? Or their male counterparts would I would put that into Bitcoin. I would do this. I would buy a car. I would do that. Yeah. And I wouldn't buy that. And she's like, yeah, but what most people are not understanding is that these are designer items. They're collector items. They're oftentimes boutique. And in 10 years, they're actually going to be worth more, right? Yeah. So A lot of like there are women who they'll take them and utilize them in the handbag, but really they're collecting them and keeping them, and they're like just like buying art. It's like a way of storing value.
So my favorite alternate, like they often say in the financial realm that you shouldn't speculate, right? That you should keep your investing and your speculation money differently in different buckets. But if you are going to speculate, my favorite way I would suggest Bitcoin as a speculation. Yes, it is a new technology. Yes, it's probably not ever going to go away, but it's hard to determine the right value. So unless you should buy it when it's low, if you're going to buy it, do not buy it when everybody else is buying it. Wait till it crashes. It's probably not going to go anywhere, but it's probably going to go up in value later. So, but if you are going to speculate, my favorite place to speculate is on art. Why? Because if it resonates with you and you like it, it's going to beautify your home. We know that a lot of good things happen to our brain when we're surrounded by beautiful items. There's a fabulous podcast I just listened to that talks about how it has a significant decreaser on the stress of your brain. It makes you less scared, which I thought was fabulous. Soft surfaces and art that you like.
Wow. I've actually not heard that. Can you elaborate?
I will find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening to it, and it talked about how if you suffer from anxiety, you should really try to make your space have soft edges. So even square corners elicit this sort of fight or flight response from us, which is interesting from an architectural point of view. I happen to really like a lot of elegant or like these square corners, but it was really interesting. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you. It's a fascinating listen. But so having fresh flowers in your space actually can have a measurable impact on your well-being, which I don't know. So I like art because you're investing in it.
Yeah.
You're going to like it, so it's going to beautify your home, and then hopefully it goes up. So it's a great use of that speculative budget if you have one.
Kristine, I think you solved a big issue for me personally because after the pandemic, me and my wife had been to each other about she wants to completely redo the house. We actually we moved into a brand new development a week before the pandemic was called.
Oh my goodness!
Our furniture was delayed for like 3 months. Like we were like, you know what I mean? Like
glamping at its finest.
Basically, right? We're like substance living. So she's like, she wants to change this. She wanted to get all this stuff, and I'm like, let's wait. I mean, the world, we don't know what's going to happen right now. Like, we should be conservative. We should, have liquidities in case. We should, invest in in third party markets, buy gold. I don't know.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And like, why are we spending? And and the conflict was, she's like, we know we're going to be here. Might as well make it nice. So we ourselves are comfortable. We feel like we're in a positive space. And she was talking about the psychological point of view, where I was talking about like the physical sense of what safety means and having that kind of thing. So, and the conflict there was in what what the goals were, right? Yeah. So it's going back to going back to the billionaire status, right? One of the main indicators as well, crazy enough, I think was 63% of billionaires accounted a successful marriage to their wealth accumulation. Right?
Because one of the best ways to damage your finances is to get divorced.
Yeah, it's the most expensive thing.
Both men and women, and contrary to popular belief, it negatively impacts women far more than men.
Yeah, so it's the greatest destruction of wealth is you experience is a divorce, and the greatest creation of wealth is a successful marriage. And the idea being the pairing of two minds and goal sets come together to figure out problems. And one of the crazy things is that we talking about the gap you're talking about is like men earn more. One of the reasons they're able to earn more and do more is because women kind of fill in another gap in part of their life, take care of different things. In the older age, in a different age, it was like literally taking things at home, paying the bills, handling all the side of things where all the man has to do is like focus on income and stress, right? So working in that dichotomy. Now it's more about partnerships. Like I make you this, you make that. How do we work in partnership to get to that? There's this great story about it was I think an insurance salesman who became one of like the highest. He hit a hallmark, like the most amount of insurance sold in a year, and he in a year, and he did it in his first year. Yeah. And a month into when he started the job, he got hit by a car and became paraplegic. Right? Oh my goodness. He's completely, could not move from the neck down, quadriplegic, sorry. And his wife actually quit her job took care of him, and then drove him to all his appointments. Sat in the restaurants while he was having meetings, his high-level meetings, because he was that good, and he ended up making I think some crazy amount of figure, like $3 million, $4 million in sales that year.
Wow.
Mostly, I'm sure having a salesperson who's quadriplegic will have like influence, right?
Yeah.
But he was able to do it.
And your need for insurance, right?
Yeah. She literally wheeled him everywhere, took him all that. And together, he took the acclaim, under his name, he got $3 million, but they went up on stage together and he attributed all the value. It's like, no, we did this together. Right. Yeah. And it's like that duo couple. Right. And oftentimes you see one of the things women take behind the stage kind of scenes. Yeah. They run the empire while the men rule the empire. Right. Yeah. And
it's so interesting you say that, because I spent 5 years, I was working at RBC. I looked at equities, I looked at the prices of stock for them. Mm-hmm. And when I lived in England, my husband also worked in capital markets. So we both worked in the finance industry. And we had a lot of friends where they were, real power couples, right? You had a pair of lawyers, barristers. You had, one was on the rise in public health and the other one was a big shot at Morgan Stanley. And you had these couples where they could both really fight for their success. And they also had, they had parental leave before we did in Canada. They had, and they just had a different concept of work-life balance. They, even the finance industry, they didn't work as hard as, it's not that they didn't work as hard. They didn't work as inefficiently and have to put in as much face time as we do in Canada. And the joke is Toronto's trying to be New York when it comes to finance. New York's taking it to the extreme. Toronto's sort of trending that way, and England never really bought in the same way. And I'm not saying the hours weren't long; they're just not as long. So you had these couples where they could both pursue their career. And then when we moved back to Canada, it really felt like that extended face time, that extended idea that you didn't have anything outside of work, that you didn't have families, meant that we really had to shore up resources behind one person. So it's in your best interest in North America, in that culture, to have someone take a step back and support the other person, so that that person has the power and velocity of two people behind them, pushing them, thrusting them up. So you can't do it. You can't have two people doing it on their own. And that's a problem, because the person who's likely to have a higher salary is the man. In all else being equal, it just is. So the woman here is more and you actually saw it play out with the she-session of COVID-19. Who left the workforce? Women in droves. They left the workforce because it was no longer possible to fake having a career with little kids in the background, right? Running around so they needed someone to have a salary, and in a typical marriage where it's a man and a woman, with two women, it'd be a different conversation, like who takes the lead. But with a man and a woman, it's almost default always the men. And women are becoming more and more the breadwinners, and yet we still saw the pandemic adversely affect more women than men. So while I applaud this woman for supporting her husband, and I applaud all these billionaires that have supportive wives, and actually Sheryl Sandberg, after her husband passed, talked about how she would have been able to do it if her husband hadn't taken up all that slack and put all that effort behind her career. I actually think we all need to lean out so that we can all be successful, regardless of whether we have a partner shoring us up. So I have a very supportive partner, but he's certainly not going to drop everything to help me build the Untangle Money empire. I have to build it on my own. Sort of inconveniently for him, I'm also not going to drop Untangle Money to shore up his career either. But I don't know. I think that's a really interesting stat, and from my point of view, less exciting perhaps than from male point of view.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Like Google Home started playing some random lyric that was creepy as hell.
Yeah, that's funny. I probably said something to set it off.
I don't know what's happening there. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, going back to this, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, people, coming together, and being able to like support each other while also doing their own thing. I think that it's very important.
Really important.
Right. So sorry, like I'm getting conscious more of time here. It's kind of
we're running out.
Blew through this, right? So let's talk, about the Untangled platform and Untangled Money platform, and what does that mean? Like, what does the future look like with your solution in place?
Yeah. So right now we have the mini, which is we take your after-tax dollars and we divide them into 5 categories. Only 2 of which you give us. We're interested in your minimum debt and your cost of living. So that cost of living is, in business parlance, it's fixed costs, but what we tell our users, it's money that you've committed to spending year over year, month over month, day over day. Money that you'd have to take action to change. You'd have to cancel your subscription. I'm really worried about the newest generation and their subscription usage, because I think it really erodes the money that they should be putting into investing. So we take your committed money and we project it into the future using a 2% inflation rate. And then we look at it for 30 years. Retire at 65 until 95. Women live longer than men. You can ask us to reduce it. We can make it any length you want, but the default is 30 years. And then we figure out how much money you need. And then we look at that. We put back into your budget how much retirement investing you need. And sometimes we won't let your flexible money go below 20% because you need to eat. We don't put food price or food costs fluctuate, birthdays, special occasions. Sometimes you're in your ramen days and you don't eat as much. So we separate that out from your committed money. But we look at how much you have the capacity to invest, and we predict how much that's going to end up and look at what the difference is. And then we start looking at things like, well, what happens if you increase your rate of return? What happens if you lower your cost of living by $100 a month? $100 for me at my age is equivalent to $50,000 in retirement need. So to serve as a $100 monthly cost for 30 years for me is $50,000. So every time I can reduce my monthly spend by $100, I can reduce the amount I need in retirement by $50,000. So we show you these, and it changes by your age, right? Because of that investment curve. So, the change isn't as meaningful depending on how old you are. But so we show like the implications of that. We look at what happens when inflation increases. All of a sudden, instead of needing $2 million to retire, you need $4 million. Just to give you a sense of, and we're not trying to doomsday anything. We're just trying to give you a sense of what the levers are, what you can control, and then and what you can change. And we also look at your flexible money. So we leave 20% of your take-home money for flexible spend, and we break it down by day, week, and month. And I think I said at the beginning that the 2 questions that women have about money is, can I afford it, and will I be okay? So the first part I described answers, will I be okay in retirement? And if not, what could that look like if it doesn't look exactly like it does today? And the second part, can I afford it? Well, we are looking at your after-tax dollars, how much flex money you have per day, and you can say in relative terms. If I have $20 I can spend a day, maybe $10 after my grocery costs are accounted for, then I can look at an item and say, is this what I want to spend the next 8 days on, right? I can say, I have $10 a day, I need to wait 8 days to make this purchase. Is that worth it for me? No judgment. Doesn't matter. Maybe I want to go 3 months saving up those $10 and buying something that's really important to me. But it helps me, it gives me an actual tool I can use day to day and think, can I afford it? And what am I willing to forego? And how, it can tell you about those trade-offs. So that's what we do. And it's $35.
That's a lot of value for $35.
Yes.
That's amazing, Kristine.
Pretty good.
Thank you so much for your time. I feel like I learned a lot, and somehow I have more questions.
Excellent.
I'd love to have you back on in another 6 months and dive deeper into this because I feel like the financial
Absolutely.
landscape is shifting so much underneath us, and there's a lot I think you can help us digest. So thank you so much for coming on.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, our product. That's just the mini. We do have a master plan which puts in things like maternity leaves or IVF payments, but we've stopped working on it for a bit just so we can focus on automating our mini. So I'd love to come back. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and for everyone who tuned in, thank you.
Great.